Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. On this week's episode, I'll be speaking with convicted murderer Joseph Barnes. On February 12th, 1993, Joseph Barnes shot and killed 57-year-old Prestiss Wells during a robbery. Joseph had talked with others about wanting to rob Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells, Joseph, and his co-defendant, Tim Brown, were in a pickup truck driving down a dirt road when Joseph told Mr. Wells to give up his money, to which he resisted. An altercation ensued, and the vehicle was parked and all three men got out of the vehicle, continuing to fight with each other. Barnes testified that he was only defending himself and hitting Mr. Wells back to make him stop. The medical examiner testified that there were 12 impact blows to the left side of the face and head, with a star or diamond-like shaped laceration, which could have been a ring or gun barrel. Joseph testified that during the fight, Mr. Wells reached into his pocket, and Joseph feared that he was going for a gun, so he went for his gun and shot Mr. Wells. He was shot twice in the left side of the torso. The third and fatal shot came after Joseph came up on a staggering, disoriented victim. He then pressed the barrel against the back of his head and fired. Joseph was arrested for the murder after he went to go visit a relative in Young Harris, Georgia. Joseph was charged, convicted, and sentenced to death. His convictions were affirmed by the courts, but vacated the death sentence. He accepted a life without the possibility of parole sentence, and the state withdrew its notice of intent to seek the death penalty. Here is my interview with Joseph Barnes. What was your first positive memory as a child?
Man, that was a long time ago. I guess the first thing I remember is just having time with the family at home. I mean, nothing, no specific incident or anything.
What was your first negative memory as a child?
I had a great childhood. My mom and dad, they both worked real hard trying to support the family. I had a older brother and an older sister. I was the baby of the family. So, everything was great when I was a kid. I just made bad mistakes that landed me here for the rest of my life. But other than that,
Did you suffer any childhood abuse or trauma?
no, no, not at all.
What was your behavior like growing up, starting as early as you can remember?
It was pretty normal, played around with sports with the other guys. Got a few fights here and there.
Let's talk about the crimes you're in prison for. In 1993, you were found guilty of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, and armed robbery. Can you walk me through everything that led up to the double homicide and robbery?
Small town judge with a grudge against my family. I got in trouble, ended up in his courtroom. He orders the DA to have the grand jury return 4 separate indictments against me. One for malice murder, 1 felony murder with aggravated assault, 1 for felony murder with armed robbery, and a 4th one for armed robbery. And then he appoints an attorney who has never tried a case before in his life to be lead counsel for a death penalty case. So they give all 4 indictments to a jury who convicts me on all 4 of them in a trial that lasted less than 20 hours, and they send me to death row. But fortunately, the judge had restricted the mitigating evidence in the sentencing phase of the trial, and so the death sentences were vacated. But there was an additional consecutive life sentence that the judge had put on there a week after trial for a consecutive life sentence for the armed robbery, which they upheld. And then when I went back to court, my case had happened before the life without parole laws had come into effect, so they had to have my written consent, and they got that consent by a contract, which included all 4 cases again. But the mystery of it all is, if you look me up now, I'm serving 3 life without parole sentences for 3 murders and consecutive life for armed robbery. Now, the mystery is, who are those 3 victims? And the answer is, all 3 are the same one, which is not legal and it's not possible, but, it's Georgia. Small town judges have a lot of credibility around here. So I'm in prison for 3 murders, and all 3 of them are for the death of the same man. But actually, I had gotten in a fight and took a man's life, and then took his money as an afterthought, but they considered it armed robbery, and that was it. But like I say, though, a small town judge with a grudge against my family kind of elevated everything. Riding around, drinking, just being mouthy. I mean, like I say, it was 30 years ago. But as best as I can recall, I mean, the fight was really over nothing. He just got, just talking trash, got heated.
So the 2 counts of felony murder that you were convicted of is the same victim then, correct?
It's the same victim as the malice murder. All 3 of them are the same victim. Or if it's different crimes happened in a different jurisdiction, or, you know, at different times. You know, you could rob a guy, in, 1 week and then come back the next week and rob him again and kill him or whatever. You get charged of both crimes and be sentenced for both crimes because they happened at different times, even though it's on the same victim. But with something like this, I mean, it was a 30-second incident that, that the judge just went haywire on and turned it into a whole lot more than what it was. I mean, yes, I know I did wrong. I mean, I was absolutely wrong for any of my actions that day, and I spend the rest of my life paying for it. But according to the laws, what they've got me locked up for and what the paperwork says is a lie. I mean, it's just completely wrong. It's not only illegal in Georgia, it's illegal in the federal courts too. But, nobody seems to be interested because they don't think it's possible to happen. But it did, and I've got the paperwork to prove it. Just nobody wants to take the time to look at it. I've got copies of all the indictments, not a 4-count indictment, but 4 completely separate indictments, signed off by a jury. They convicted me on all 4 counts, and then they used all 4 of those indictments in sentencing for the death sentence and for the life without parole sentences. It's not only is it not legal to have somebody convicted of 3 murders for the same victim, but it's not possible to kill one person 3 times. It's just pretty simple, but But like I say, though, I mean, that doesn't take away from the severity of the crime that I committed. And that's something that I've had to pay for. Like I say, they sent me to death row for 7 years, and I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life in prison, even though I'm not on death row, I'm still under a death sentence, more or less, because they don't ever want me to get out. But I deserve it. I really do. I mean, the things that I've done in my past, everything, just gradually escalating until I finally got to the point of where I was doing stupid stuff like that. I mean, I never should have been there. I shouldn't have been drinking. I shouldn't have been hanging out with the crowds that I hang out with. I should have been home. I was doing all the wrong things and ended up doing the ultimate wrong thing that just cost me the rest of my life.
How long after the crimes occurred were you apprehended?
It was a week later. A week later, they came and picked me up. I had left town with my friend who was there when it happened. He didn't have anything to do with it, but he was there when it happened. And he just didn't tell anybody, so they gave him a life sentence as well. He served 18 years just for being there when I went crazy.
Were you afraid you might be sentenced to death while on trial?
No, not really, because I had already accepted the fact that that's what they were going to do. I mean, they were, due to all the other circumstances, with the judge having problems with my family. I mean, that old guy, he ran that town. I mean, he was like the big boss hog, I'd like to say, of the Walton and Newton counties at the time. Whatever he did, nothing in that town that wasn't without his agreement to it. If he didn't want it to happen, it didn't happen. So he is retired and deceased since then. So
after you were found guilty, you were sentenced to death. How did you feel when you were handed down your death sentence?
Well, it was pretty much over. I spent what little bit of time I had left waiting to be executed. Trying to do things for other people, trying to help people, and doing all I could for my family. Trying to ease their mind and make things as unemotional for them. They were coming to see me a couple of times a month, spending time with me on death row at visitation and stuff. But they were worried. They were saddened. I mean, they didn't just sentence me to death. In a way, it sentenced them to death as well. They think that just because they sentence somebody to come to prison, if they got any family members, they're pretty much sentenced to prison too, because that's the only way they're ever going to see their family members again. And then when they come to prison to see their families, then they have to go through the same kind of crap that we do. Sometimes they have to get pat searched, and if something like a little old grandma comes through the metal detector and she's got a wire support in her bra, she's liable to have to get strip searched. So just to make sure she doesn't have anything on her. So they have to go through the same things that we do while we're in prison. So they're actually locked up with us, to a sense. And it's not fair to them. And it's just, it's part of the consequences of our mistakes.
Your death sentence was vacated years later, which left you with a life without the possibility of parole sentence. Tell me how the process was in court with that when fighting your death sentence up until you did get a vacated sentence.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about doing any kind of legal work or anything, and the lawyer that I had, being as inexperienced as he was, as I said, he had never tried a murder case before, so he wasn't familiar with the steps to go through for a death penalty case either. But I was lucky enough for one of the guys on death row to give me an address to a place called the Georgia Resource Center, who handles indigent death penalty cases. So I got in touch with them, and they immediately got onto my case and done the motion for new trial and coached my trial attorney for the direct appeal to the Georgia Supreme Court. So they actually did all the work that got the death sentence vacated. And I'm just sitting in a cell for several years waiting on that. Once they filed the motion for new trial, then the judge sat on the appeal for 2 years before he ever decided to make a ruling on it. It was a relief to my family, but to me, I really not sure that it was any better. I've wished 1,000 times that I could return to death row instead of having to deal with all the aggravating crap that you have to deal with in population of prison. I mean, all the different attitudes. It's very, very racially charged in a lot of areas. It's a lot of aggravation. I mean, just getting treated like animals, Everybody's screaming and hollering. They want you to hurry up and do this and hurry up and do that. And I'm thinking, yeah, you want me to spend the rest of my life in prison, but you want me to hurry up and do it. Makes a lot of sense. But, in Georgia, this is one of the few states that don't pay the prisoners for their work, so it's just pre-labor, Start with, Georgia was one of the original 13, which turned out to be the penal colony of it all, and when they abolished slavery, well, they just enhanced their prison system, and it still carries on today. Nothing has changed. Use inmates for free labor, treat them like animals, feed them and put them back in their pens.
How do you spend your time in prison these days?
I spend a lot of time in religious studies. I do a lot of work with the chaplain's offices. I play music for his praise team. There's a ministry called Kairos. I'm currently the rector of that ministry. I help with the Protestant ministries, but mostly my duties are with the Catholic service. I kind of like to go between for the volunteers, anything that they need. I make sure the chaplain's office takes care of it. When the volunteers are not here, then I lead the services myself. I teach them catechism and scripture studies, and just spend my time just in a lot of prayer, study and pray. I pretty much turned prison into a monastery as much as I can. And it's worked out pretty good. And it's about the only way you can have any peace of mind. Most of my family members have already passed away, and what few are left are not in that great a shape. So I just take it day by day, living in the moment, trusting in God to work things out.
Have you been diagnosed with any mental illnesses?
Depression.
Before we conclude this interview, is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
No, not that I know of, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity, and I hope maybe this is what you were looking for.
That was my interview with Joseph Barnes. Thank you for listening.